The current zeitgeist that we are in, we are leaning towards conservatism. There's these kind of purity politics happening again for women, and the thin, white, blonde, blue-eyed figure is kind of looming over as the ideal once again.
Sydney Sweeney's interesting to me because she's done nothing to make her body look particularly different. She's not had a boob job, she's not gone sort of bleach blonde. Just by sort of having boobs and going on telly, people say she's the harbinger of the death of woke. That's the sort of extreme time she's living in.
Is this just another phase we'll go through and it'll come back round? Is this driven by Trump, and that once that goes, something else will come along? Or is it more profound than that? Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. Is fashion the latest thing to be swallowed into current politics, culture war and the backlash on woke? Stick-thin models with protruding bones with a marketing choice of Zara for a new campaign. They've just been banned by the Advertising Standards Authority as irresponsible. And the fallout from Sydney Sweeney's ad campaign for American Eagle jeans keeps growing. A few years ago, accusations of white supremacy and promoting the right wing might have caused a share price to plummet. But after Donald Trump described the ad as the hottest ad out there, American Eagle stock rocketed. So are we back in the 90s or even the 30s? Ad agencies have always looked for ways to get noticed. But is the war on woke also sweeping away years of progress on body positivity and diversity? Katie Glass writes about these things for The Times, and Jayne Crabbe is a writer, presenter and activist for body positivity and feminism. Megan, when you saw those Zara images that hark back a long way, what did you think?
Honestly, I thought they were eerily reminiscent of the era of skinny inspiration on Tumblr. You know, we're seeing now a skinny talk on TikTok. It definitely felt like the images I would have compared myself to when I was a teenager and I was deeply struggling with my body image.
The thing that body positivity was a reaction against?
Yeah, and without a doubt, we have gone sliding on backwards over the last couple of years. Diversity and representation is way down. The thin is in mantra is absolutely everywhere, and this is the latest representation of that.
Thin is in, you're seeing it where?
I'm seeing it on socials, I'm seeing it in brands, on runways, even TV shows. You know, the TV shows that have diversity are cancelled. And even in plus-size sizing in stores. Plus-size collections are being pulled out of stores and put only online.
Katie, what's your initial reaction to this? Because, I mean, the system clamped down on it immediately.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good thing that we have some sort of measures about what looks extremely unhealthy on either side. I suppose I sort of thought it was predictable in the sense that fashion's job is to sort of mirror cultural discussions and cultural movements. We're in an age of sort of injectable weight loss jabs. Even Heston Blumenthal's talking about how people don't want to go to restaurants anymore. So we know this is a sort of mainstream thing going on. Of course, fashion's reflected that swing to sort of people being thinner. I guess I felt it was really depressing because, as usual, that discussion is playing out over women's bodies. It's always women's bodies, whether they like it or not, over which these sort of political and cultural battles are happening. And that just feels a bit depressing to me, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it really feels like we've gone back in time, doesn't it? I mean, where women don't have agency over what is regarded as attractive again, because commerce and politics have taken over.
Well, it's always been the case, hasn't it, that sort of capitalism's been in charge of what's attractive. But like the fact that focus is still on women, I don't know if it's that we've gone back in time. It just feels like nothing's changed. You know, I was sort of thinking back to Elizabeth I, talking about her body as the sort of virgin queen. And, you know, like forever, these political debates on women's bodies. Why don't we talk about what men look like and whether that reflects a change in culture?
Because interestingly, we do not see ads or representation of men's bodies that promotes the super unhealthy as often.
We see like Levi's ads and Calvin Klein ads in which men with six packs are walking around. You know, on Love Island, we've got men sort of like obsessed with their bodies. That's happening on sort of, you talked about social media culture. So I don't feel it is just happening to women. I do think it's happening to men too. But the discussion and, you know, the debate and that sort of political wrangling always feels like it's over women's bodies, that they're somehow responsible for that.
What is a desirable men's body has become incredibly two-dimensional recently, hasn't it? Because of, you know, the gym and muscles and all that kind of, that is it. So yeah, you're right. There's no sort of there's no heroin chic for men right now, but
it's still unrealistic and unattainable for the majority.
Yeah. So, I mean, so what has happened to the whole body positivity movement in fashion over the last few years?
Oh my gosh.
Has it just collapsed?
Well, listen, I've been part of the body positive movement for 10 years. So I kind of was in it before it was a thing. I saw it at its peak around 2017. We had way more diversity. You know, Lizzo was singing, his films with plus size main characters were out. It was fantastic. And it has felt like over the last few years, especially since the introduction of Ozempic and other GLP-1s, things have just slowly trickled backwards.
And what's happened to work for the models?
Was dried up. I have quite a few friends who are plus size models who are getting nowhere near as much work as they used to get. And even body positive influencers who are being told directly by brands, we're not doing the body positive thing anymore. You know, we're not doing the diversity thing. So they've were using it when it was useful to them.
Is it both? Is it body positivity and diversity?
Yes, I think so.
That are both going backwards?
I think so. And I think, again, that's reflective of the time that we're in, where we are seeing a massive pushback and a swing back towards conservatism.
I mean, what wasn't the whole sort of commercial rationale, though, for body positivity that, you know, most of the buying public are not perfect and don't look like the models, and therefore you've got to appeal?
Yes, appeal to them. But also, fashion has always been aspirational. I mean, most people aren't walking around with the sort of £5,000 Dolce & Gabbana dress on, or maybe even aspiring to ever own one. So the idea I'm supposed to look at a model and think I should look like that, I guess has never... But like, don't get me wrong, I thought body positivity was a wonderful thing. It was a sort of exciting time. The pendulum swings one way. And I talked to model agents who talked about at the time how blonde, you know, blue-eyed, very skinny girls weren't getting work. The pendulum swinging another way. That's fashion's job, isn't it? To sort of, you know, change the discussion all the time. And like I say, I think it's obviously, you said yourself, it's a reflection, isn't it, of the sort of rise of Ozempic, and maybe a comment on that, which I'm just sort of longing for a fashion discussion that's interesting. So I'm up for that, you know, a sort of provocative reflection of the fact weight loss jabs have come in. And I don't know why that's so sort of problematic.
Look, in amongst all of this, though, we've got a very political row going on in America around Sydney Sweeney. Now, American Eagle do this ad campaign. A load of people sort of jump on it on social media and accuse them of supporting eugenics and white supremacy and all of that because she's talking about genes. They, of course, deny it and say it's just about the genes. In amongst all of that, it's revealed that she's a registered Republican. Trump swings in behind her and says, she's hot, this is amazing, it's the best ad ever. And it's a commercial success. That's quite weird, isn't it?
I would say that anything that Trump gets behind and says that's hot, steer clear of. Do not touch with a barge.
But people aren't, clearly. I mean, you know, MAGA's a big movement. Lots of people are prepared to buy into it, and it's a commercial success.
Yeah.
But I think also that's how buying power has shifted, isn't it? People are talking about their politics through what they buy, the way you see people sort of boycott Israel, for example. But I mean, yeah, like Trump being interested in some genes, like I guess it just only reflects really how politically divisive things are now, that people feel that they want to show their support for Trump in this mad way by buying some, frankly, rather horrible sort of mum-shaped jeans.
But I suppose, but where does that fit in, if you like, in terms of, you know, the culture war? You know, is American fashion, again, sort of just now picking sides? You know, you've got Beyonce with her Levi's ad and Sydney Sweeney with her American Eagle ad. And you've got people sort of taking sides and wearing badges to show it, I suppose.
Well, it is certainly interesting that fashion, it just shows how divisive things are in America, that people are picking up on that and they're discussing. I mean, that people would compare just a jeans advertisement to Nazism is just sort of wild, and it just goes to show on both sides of the discussion how polarised things have got, really, that people, you know, feel such strong affinity to those sort of things. But it happened with the Budweiser ad as well, didn't it?
Yeah, and I do hear that. I do hear that it's kind of taken on a real life of its own. But I think that in part, the success of the body positive movement a handful of years ago was because people started voicing on social media, actually, is this okay? I'm not happy with this. Can we get more representation? So I'm all for people calling things out when they think, yeah, that's offensive or that's not good enough.
But do you think the progressives fell into the trap again, if you like, of saying something that was, you know, slightly over the top for a lot of people? You know, that they jumped straight for Nazi off the back of a jeans campaign, which just enabled, you know, everybody else to go, oh, you know, this is why wokery is a disaster.
Absolutely, and it was such clickbait, and the response was so predictable. One sort of suspects that might have been part of the advertising campaign itself, surely.
Interesting.
Deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed so like automatic. It sort of happened straight away. You know, this sort of provocative advertisement in which he's playing with this sort of offensive idea of eugenics, which he can't have realised is not happening at a time when Trump's clamping down on immigration. So I think what is interesting to me about Sydney Sweeney is she has chosen to lean into those discussions, not sort of verbally. She's not saying anything.
In the past, she has.
Well, she knows her body is going to be the centre of those discussions anyway, and she's willing to like let it be and sort of engage in those conversations rather than let other people have them over her and not be sort of part of that debate herself, I think. Other women's bodies are always used in that way. Look at Kim Kardashian or Dolly Parton. People are always talking about how women's bodies look. Sydney Sweeney's interesting to me because she's done nothing to make her body look particularly different. She's not had a boob job. She's not gone sort of bleach blonde. She just looks the way she looks, and she can't seem to win just by sort of having boobs and going on telly. People say she's the harbinger of the death of woke. I mean, that's the sort of extreme time she's living in. I love her for leaning into that and saying, okay, well, I'll do an ad. I'll do, produce some soap in which I pretend it's made from my bathwater. I think she's sort of hilarious, isn't she?
She's definitely playing the game and winning.
But how does that fit into your whole worry about how women aren't in control of this conversation? I mean, she might be in control momentarily of making a load of money and raising her fame, but is she playing into something that is actually quite bad for women?
Well, she's talked, hasn't she, about in interviews about how she feels she's lost control of her body. People have these conversations over her body. I was thinking about that essay by Emily Ratajkowski, where she talks about paparazzi snapping her image and then someone taking that image and putting it in a gallery and selling it. And she sort of plays with this idea of what control has she got over her image. Well, Sydney Sweeney's body is going to be a matter of discussion and debate anyway. And she's just chosen to say, I'm going to try and have a little bit of control over that.
I think ultimately the issue with Sydney Sweeney and the issue even with this Zara ad, it's not necessarily, these bodies shouldn't be seen or they shouldn't be taking up this space. It's just where is everyone else? The average woman in the UK is a size 16. And so the average size that we should be seeing in advertising surely is that. And I don't believe that fashion needs to be this aspirational, unreachable thing. I think it should be reflective of who we actually are. And when it does that, when it does tap into diversity and represents people, it shows they make money. Plus size collections make money.
Well, do they? I mean, because if it really was a commercial imperative that drove plus size models and body positivity, they'd still be doing it. Why would they drop it?
Because it's no longer fashionable. It's no longer, in vogue to represent all bodies. And also because I think a lot of brands don't want to deal with the backlash. Because as much as we did have a moment of body positivity, brands had to deal with a lot of people who were against that and didn't agree with that. And a lot of them then have tapped out at the earliest possible opportunity because they were just hopping on the bandwagon. So
how has that played out in your world, particularly online, I suppose, the backlash?
Well, there's always been naysayers. There's always been trolls. I would say there's definitely been a new influx of commentary on any woman who dares to exist in a body that is above maybe a size 10. These automatic assumptions about health, you're irresponsible, you shouldn't be showing yourself, you're disgusting. Huge amounts of misogyny and body shaming just coming in endlessly, especially from the kind of TikTok side of things.
Now, Katie mentioned the weight loss jabs. What effect do you think that's had on what's attractive?
I think GLP-1s have changed everything. I think we have forever been searching for this magic miracle weight loss solution. In the 1920s, we were sold cigarettes as that solution. There's been drugs like fen-phen that were recalled because they did so much damage. And now we have GLP-1s. And I think it goes to show that a lot of people, they never stopped looking for that miracle and they were always willing to do whatever they could, really, to buy into it. And even now, we don't know the long-term consequences of being on these drugs. We don't know what's going to happen in 20 years' time. And yet we've been caught up in this fervor of thin is back in, and it's represented everywhere, and all the, Hollywood starlets have jumped on the bandwagon. And I think, again, it's that the idea of exclusivity or that rareness of, we had the kind of Kardashian era where we saw more curvaceous women. And then as soon as women kind of got more comfy in that, snap back to something that is unattainable and really difficult to achieve, is that kind of exclusivity that we've seen throughout time as well, especially when it comes to class. Often throughout history, women of a higher class have always sought to essentially just have the more rare body type, whether that was larger 100 years ago or thinner.
I mean, I agree with you that definitely a problem with the weight loss jabs is you do have this difference that some women can afford them, or men too. Some people can't afford them. But, we can't have a sort of conversation about thinness and weight loss jabs without bringing health into it. And I do think, without sort of making some wild assumption that anyone plus size is super unhealthy, I think there's a really interesting thing happening in a sort of post-COVID time where people are thinking about their health more. We see the headline obesity crisis in the sort of tabloids, but proper discussions of that in the paper all the time. And I think people are conscious of, it is a balance. It's not just about looking a certain way. Some people want to lose weight because we do know it's healthier. And I don't think we should be chastised for that. Well, of course, being fitter, not eating processed foods. Yeah, all those things are healthier. But there is a sort of correlation. Yes. I wouldn't make assumptions about people either way. But, yes, so to be too thin is very unhealthy. Although we also know that to be overweight is unhealthy. And we had a sort of era, didn't we, when it was Tess Holliday on the front cover of Cosmopolitan, this great celebration. And I don't think that's bad, but maybe it is problematic. Now people are being more health conscious, whether we should promote either end of the sort of spectrum.
I think it's not directly comparable. I think when we see, the woman in the Zara ad, she becomes one more example in this never-ending stream of extreme thinness that we are seeing, and it just plays into the already existing narrative that thin is the best way to be and the only way to be for women. Whereas when we see one plus-size person, even a very, much larger plus-size person, that is not adding on to a narrative already that, pressures women to gain weight or be larger.
I mean, it was interesting that Zara's response was to point out that these models had been certified as in good health, which I'm assuming if they certify thin models, they must certify everybody as in good health.
That's such a good point. Do they certify plus-size models as being in good health?
Have you ever heard of that?
Nope, never heard of it.
Well, I mean, so it'll be interesting what that actually means and who does the assessment. But I mean, is the health conversation a bit of a fib? I suppose is what I wonder. In the same way that the whole plus size rationale was about, it makes commercial sense because most people aren't, thin and tall and, and beautiful. And so we've got to represent the consumer. That was sort of a bit of a post hoc rationalization for fashion. And that maybe this is the same, that the health benefits of being thin through weight loss jabs might be a bit of a post hoc rationalization for the truth, which is just the establishment like blonde, white, thin people. And that's what the establishment view of what's attractive
and yet
is.
Here we all are.
But also the establishment like to make money. Come on, the GLP.
Well, I mean, I suppose the establishment is a bit of a get out for me. I mean, that people, society, the Western world, the ideal of what is attractive in our society is still thin.
Yeah.
And isn't going to change.
Look, I think it's a nuanced conversation when we want to talk about health and GLP-1s, and obviously you can't tell any one individual what they can and can't do for their body and what they think they're doing for their health. But also, I personally think it's kind of absurd to promote something on the basis of health that we literally don't know what it is doing long-term to people's health. We have no idea.
Yes, but that's a slightly separate issue because that's about substance. We're talking about the sort of ephemeral nonsense of appearance, aren't we?
I actually
let alone put the health aside. We're just talking about how people look.
I'm probably sort of not fashionable enough, but to me it feels like there's been a shift towards strength, with people finding stronger looking bodies more attractive. I think that reflects a sort of shift towards health. Zara aside, which is a sort of fashion brand or is trying to, associate itself with being a high fashion brand. Actually, I think a lot of the images we see are of strong women, I'm thinking in pop, people like Katy Perry or Wet Legs performance at Glastonbury. People like strong women are finding that there's a move towards that and not this sort of thinness. I'm surprised when you talk about it being sort of ubiquitous because we must have different algorithms on our social media, I suppose.
I think we do. I do agree that there definitely was a push towards strength, but to me that was almost happening now a few years ago. And even when we are seeing these very strong women, it's still an incredibly low body fat percentage. We don't often see women who are strong and soft at the same time.
Do you feel cheated by people like Lizzo who've chosen to use weight loss jabs? I'm curious, because I guess she's talked both about the fact that she wants to represent body positivity, and at the same time, she's sort of obviously on a sort of health. She has talked about it as a health journey, hasn't she?
She has, and my opinion is she can obviously do what she wants with her own body. It doesn't feel great to have lost a really key figure of representation of the movement. A lot of people do feel betrayed by that. There's kind of a sense of grief, I think, which is understandable. But again, I try not to kind of project my feelings onto her as an individual, because she can do what she wants.
It feels so surprising when we have this discussion, we start with Sydney Sweeney, though, because when I see her, I think that is a return to body positivity, isn't it? I mean, she's not a Zara thin model.
Because she's not, yes.
She's not manipulated her body. The last person we were having these intense debates around, which was sort of Kim Kardashian, really did feel like a body that was sort of manipulated and unobtainable. Whereas Sydney Sweeney looks reasonably natural. It's just what she looks like, isn't it?
But the Sydney Sweeney debate, I suppose, is again, it's about what's attractive, isn't it? And specifically the controversy is around, is she saying, blonde, white, blue eyes is what's attractive? And in Trump's MAGA world, it largely is. If you look at what's happening to MAGA women, and all the, his half of his cabinet and the people around him and the amount of plastic surgery that's going on amongst those women and the traditional look, that is a type, isn't it? That's where the controversy is with Sydney Sweeney, that she's playing into all of that.
I guess so, but again, that feeling, it just feels relentless for women. Pamela Anderson doesn't wear makeup. We have a conversation about that. Trumpian women, look overinflated or wear too much makeup. We have to have a conversation about that. If women have Botox, they're done. If they don't have Botox, if they're too big or if they're too small, it just feels sort of relentless. Actually, I said to your producer, I got asked to come on here, and the first thing I thought is, what am I going to wear? Which is just so boring. Something that's intensely boring being a woman, like having to think about your sort of, I just want to sit around reading books. For a man, I just don't feel they're having these relentless conversations about how they look and having to think about that all the time.
I wouldn't assume that, to be honest, because I think particularly with young men, their look is something a lot of them are obsessing about as well. And we know that eating disorders are massive amongst men now, and mental health crises because of it as well. But it's different, certainly.
It's not happening for men, but I don't think it's making front page news in the same way. It feels relentless for women.
No, but that's again, that's capitalism, isn't it? It's industries run either by men or women in male-owned industries that drive that conversation. In terms of where you think this is going, is it just fashion? Is this just another phase we'll go through and it'll come back round? Is this driven by Trump, and that once that goes, something else will come along? Or is it more profound than that?
Look, I think it's all interconnected. I don't think you can say this is solely because of any one thing. I think the current zeitgeist that we are in, we are leaning towards conservatism. We are, there's these kind of purity politics happening again for women, and the thin, white, blonde, blue-eyed figure is kind of looming over as the ideal once again. And these are all kind of intertwined with each other. My feeling, and the feeling of many people I've spoken to, I was interviewing Jamila Jamil recently, and even she said, just hold on. Just brace yourself and hold on, because we know that this will circle back around. We have been here before, we'll be here again. So just wait for it. And in probably 5 years, maybe body positivity will have a boom again.
And how important is it in that meantime to keep banging the drum? Keep talking about it, keep writing about it, keep doing what you're doing on social media?
It is so important. And it's, it's not just important for women like me. It's important for all people, and especially, our teenage girls, the girls who are shopping on Zara every day and seeing that advert, or on TikTok and getting sucked into skinny talk. That is why we need to change the narrative and continue to have the representation that is the bare minimum. Diversity and representation, that's not the most that a brand can do. It's the absolute least. And it's frankly just cowardly that they don't.
What is skinny talk?
It's the modern day equivalent of pro-Anna content, which kind of used to live and thrive on Tumblr. And now skinny talk is content that is actively saying, this is how I get really thin, promoting disordered eating behaviors, idolizing very thin women.
And that's able to happen way beyond the scope of any kind of regulation or Online Safety Act or anything like that.
Give it 5 years again, and there'll probably be some kind of act around it. But it's happening now, yeah.
And that feels ironic because it is actually driven by young women themselves, which suggests that it's not just women being or young people being influenced by advertising, but also that they, this sort of dialectical conversation that they're promoting that stuff themselves, aren't they, online?
Well, and there is, just to poke you a little bit with your why are we talking about this? I mean, you wrote an article about Sydney Sweeney. You're talking about it.
No, I want to talk about it, but I'm saying we should. I want to celebrate her. I want to celebrate the fact she's lent into this discussion that's happening over her body that she can't control. It's a capitalist thing. She's talked about how nowadays you can't just be an actress. You have to sort of promote brands. You have to do other work that people are going to talk about her body and take that away from her. So I really wanted to sort of write something and say, I support her actually. And I understand why as a young woman, the only way maybe to seize control of that discussion, over that public discussion over your body, that public discussion that's happening over her breasts that are just part of her body that she can't do anything about, and not that she should. It's just like now she's trying to seize control of that in some way. And I just want to sort of like celebrate for her and stand up for it a bit because it feels like she's attracted nothing but criticism.
Thank you both very much indeed. That's it for this episode of The Fourcast. Until next time, bye-bye.